KFUG, Crescent City 101.1 on your FM radio dial, worldwide on the internet, kfugradio.org. I'm Mike Thornton. This is Public Process. 9 minutes past the top of the hour. That hour here on the north coast of the North Coast is 11 a.m. Who knows what it is wherever you may be in the world listening to this fine community radio station. We are glad you are with us, and we are glad to have our first guest of the day, Geneva Wiki, program manager for the California Endowment, and a lot is going on, a lot's been going on, a lot will go on, and we're going to talk about all of it on Public Process today. Geneva, thank you so much for joining us on the program.
Thank you for having me.
Let me ask you to come a little bit closer to that mic, and that way we can hear everything that you have to say.
Fantastic.
So one of the things that we try to do on this program is not just talk about what someone does, but who that person is. And so, like if somebody says, well, who's Geneva Wiki and why does she do the stuff that she does? How would you respond to that?
Yeah, thanks for that. That's a great question. For me, it really comes back to who I am and where I come from and who my people are. So I'm an enrolled member of the Yurok tribe, Yurok on my great-grandmother, Geneva Brooks Matz, and Tolowa on my great-grandfather's side, Emery Matz from Smith River. And I come from a long line of renegades. I come from people like my uncle Raymond Matz, who sued the U.S. government in a case that went all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court that reinstated and reaffirmed Yurok's rights to fish our river and to be people on our reservation. And my auntie Susan Maston, who is the president of the National Congress of American Indians, and only the second woman to ever hold that title, so the highest elected leader in all of Indian country. And so I grew up with this sense of responsibility and also a joy in serving my community. Like, to be a good Yurok means to have responsibilities and to take care of people and to take care of your family and your community. And from a very from a very young age, that those values really drove me.
And it sounds like a feeling and sense of agency to be able to actually carry that out, right?
Yeah, so my family's really fortunate in that we get to live in the place that we've lived since the beginning of time. So my grandmother's house is at the mouth of the Klamath River, at the village of Rekoy, literally where our people have been since time immemorial. And we have another allotment up at Brooks Riffle up the river, and both are, spectacularly beautiful places of, very powerful, spiritually powerful places. And I think that sense of connection to a place and a place of such beauty and power and spirituality helps also make you feel like you can have agency.
Talk a little bit more about that connection, because I want to say this the way I really mean it, right? Because I think some people, they'll say that, right?
Yeah.
But what does it really mean?
To be connected to the land?
Yes, what does that really mean?
It's hard to talk about it without it sounding, a little hokey.
Hokey's okay.
Because, it's, I think for a lot of Yurok people, our feelings about the river, the Klamath River, is not just, a beautiful place or a natural body of water or a great place to gather fish. It is really our spiritual home in a lot of ways. So our relationship to that river transcends, sometimes even transcends words, but it feels more like, depending on what you need in your life, that the river can be your counselor, can be your grandmother, can be your teacher. It can give you we often talk about like our well-being is tied to the well-being of that river and the well-being of the fish. And so, Nepui is our word for salmon in our language, is the word for food in the Yurok language. And so that connection to the river is bigger for lots of Yuroks. And for me, it feels bigger than, a connection to any one place. It transcends feeling into a spiritual realm that's really hard to put into words.
We're speaking with Geneva Wiki, who, among many things in this community, is the program manager for the California Endowment. Geneva, part of the reason why I asked that, and I don't mean it in necessarily the same sense as an indigenous connection,
right?
But it seems like so much of that has been lost for so many people.
That's right.
In our society as a whole, and in this community in particular.
Yeah, and I think for a lot of indigenous people, that's the balance that we're trying to seek, right? Is how do we show up in mainstream society and come with our whole selves when maybe our heart really, like right now, well, besides the rain, my heart really wants to be gathering seaweed today and staying home for a week.
Well, and you came in here with something.
Processing seaweed. And instead, right, well, I'm going to work. And so there is that, there are natural cycles, especially when folks who are connected to traditional food sources, like we all feel better when we eat a traditional diet of, fish and acorns and seaweed and other, sea life. That's when we feel our best. When we eat junk like sugar and processed flour, we do not feel our best. And so lots of us are working really hard to make sure that our children have a variety of traditional foods as part of their daily diet or a regular basis of their diet. And to do that takes time. And often, like indigenous food is ready when it's ready. It's not, you can't just show up at the grocery store and pick up seaweed.
You're not going to go to like Mick Indigenous, right?
Exactly. Unfortunately. And so to do that in a good way is often in contradiction to other responsibilities that we have to live in today's society.
You were talking about work. Let's talk a little bit about work. You are involved deeply with the California Endowment. The California Endowment is and has been involved deeply in this community. Talk, if you will, about some of that history and your involvement with it.
Yeah. So the California Endowment is a private health foundation. So we were created when Blue Shield went private and was required to set aside some funding to use for the betterment of the health of Californians. And so right now, our endowed fund is close to $4 billion, that's billion with a B, dollars, is being invested in various places in order to improve the health and well-being of Californians. We are just over 20 years old as an organization, and the first 10 years of the California Endowment, we funded like lots of other foundations. So some of the things you would recognize here would be, say, part of the Family Resource Center or the Harrington House or health clinics, the Senior Center. And all of those are really important, good services and infrastructure that our community needs. But after 10 years of funding and spending about $1 billion, the California Endowment looked across the state and said, we've not improved the health of Californians at all. We've not met our mission. And so in 2009, they announced this new idea called Building Healthy Communities Initiative. And the notion, their theory, was that if we deeply invested for 10 years, made a 10-year commitment to deeply invest in certain communities that both had high need, but also some demonstrated capacity to work together to change things. that we could change health outcomes for people. And so they looked across the state, they did all kinds of analysis, and I can share like the goofy stories of how, what it was like on the side of a nonprofit director at that time. But they chose what they call Del Norte and tribal lands to be one of these 14 communities. And so that means it's our entire county of Del Norte County and the entire Yurok Reservation, most of which is in Humboldt County.
And to be clear, at least my understanding is this is unique compared to the other Building Healthy Communities areas that were chosen. There's nothing else like this, correct?
No, in lots of ways. One is we're the only county-wide site. We're the only site that clearly called out tribal communities and recognized that there were 4 federally recognized tribal governments within this site. We're also very much the most rural and most sparsely populated. And we're the largest, by a long shot, the biggest geography of any of the sites. So others are like Coachella or Boyle Heights, like slices of neighborhoods, like Richmond, South Sacramento, slices of neighborhoods or small places and not full counties.
So I guess my question is, how did this get chosen? I mean, I certainly understand the need, but what was the thinking behind it?
It depends on who you ask, right? Of course, like anything. And so a few things that we should know and give credit to. So Maria Tripp, the former tribal chairwoman of the Yurok tribe, served on the board of directors of the California Endowment for 10 years, as did Peter Pennycamp, who was the former executive director of the Humboldt Area Foundation. Right. Let's be clear that they were big, strong voices for our region and for our people. Is one important answer. The other is there was something special happening in Del Norte, long before the California Endowment came here. Lots of people will tell the story of when the community built Kid Town playground at the beach, and that, hundreds and hundreds of people collected monies, and, the kids had piggy banks full of money, and then people all came together and physically built this playground, as well as donated, tons of hours and volunteer and money and all these things. And it was a demonstration of the power of people coming together to try to do something positive and to be successful. The Wild Rivers Community Foundation was established in 2004 with a lot of the same players and with a lot of that same momentum of Kid Town. It's an affiliate of Humboldt Area Foundation, so it had a lot of infrastructure in place, but it's governed by a local board of people. It serves both Curry County, Oregon, and Del Norte County, California, and the board represents leaders from across our region, that we call the Wild Rivers region. And when the California Endowment came to town, so at that point, I did not work for the Endowment. I did not work for Wild Rivers Community Foundation. I was running a nonprofit organization out of Klamath, a school, and virtually all of the nonprofits in the community were invited to a meeting with the California Endowment as an assessment to see, was there real readiness here? Right. And were people really in relationship? And years before this happened, the Chamber of Commerce actually had organized a whole group of partners. The city, the county, the harbor, the school district had all come together and really had focused on an economic development plan. There's has199.com was one of the acronyms. So they were working on big infrastructure projects. At that point, this was, I guess, quite a while ago, right. 15 years or more, the harbor, the airport, the sewer, broadband, 199, all of which now, 15, 20 years later, all of those things have actually been worked on. And so there was a collection of people who really had a shared vision of where this community could go, and what were the key pieces that we needed to put in place in order to have the infrastructure to get to be really a thriving community. So when the California Endowment came to town, so imagine all these nonprofit leaders in a room. It was 2009, so we were all hurting from the economic crisis. We were all doing great work serving our community, and the promise on the table was millions of dollars, right? More money than any of us had seen come to this community in terms of private foundation funding. And they asked us a series of questions, but more importantly, they got to witness the true relationship of this small town. They could see that we could all speak with one voice about what our vision of this community was, and that we had already done some deep analysis about what it would take to get there. So we got chosen in 2009. And at that point, some of the local leadership came to me and they said, basically, like, we've seen what you've been able to do out of the back of the Klamath Market with this school, and it's magnificent. And we think you could do the same kind of good work, but on a bigger scale. Will you come and serve as at that point, the executive director of the Wild Rivers Community Foundation, which was also the community had chosen it to be the planning organization for the planning piece of the Building Healthy Communities initiative.
We're speaking with Geneva Wiki of the California Endowment. You're tuned to KFUG, Crescent City, 101.1 on your FM radio dial, worldwide on the internet, kfugradio.org. This is Public Process. I'm your host, Mike Thornton. Geneva, you've used the word relationship a couple of times, and relationship is incredibly crucial to all of this. Talk more about that, if you will.
Yeah, so let's see. I just listened to Brene Brown's talk about the anatomy of trust, but on my way here, so that's top of mind actually, and part of like the. One of the principles that we often use is power lies in relationship, right? And in a community like ours, our relationships are complicated. And this is something I get to talk to my colleagues in places like Oakland and LA about. Like, my doctor could also be my neighbor. And, literally, my doctor is also, teaches my kid's dance teacher, right? Like, there's no simple relationship in this community, and there's no anonymity, so we can go to Safeway and see the person who we just had to have an awkward conversation with somewhere else, and in that relationship and the ability to build real authentic relationships where we can be vulnerable, where we can ask for help, where we can give each other help, where we can listen deeply to what really matters to people, there's real power in that. And, most of my favorite stories of what we've been able to do in the Building Healthy Communities work over the last 9 years goes back to like forging new relationships and forging new power via relationships that didn't exist before.
It's interesting, and this is a bit of an aside, not necessarily what we're talking about today, but I heard something the other day that really struck me, and they were talking about the upcoming 2020 elections, right? And someone said that it's going to kind of boil down to the politics of empathy versus the politics of grievance. And I think that makes sense. And I think that empathy and empathy work is so much a part of what Building Healthy Communities uses as its base in order to develop these relationships, to build these types of programs and structures in order to achieve the deep kinds of health and other goals that BHC was set up in the first place. Does that make sense to you?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I also have to say, that wasn't how we came out the gates. So when we designed the initiative in 2010, and I'll take full credit and full blame for all of it.
They seem to go together sometimes.
Yeah, right. We had this notion that if we just got like everyone together around a table and looked at shared data, we could solve complicated problems. And in some instances, we were right. We were able to do that. What we also, to back up for one piece of the story, back to when all those nonprofit organizations were in a room together, and me being one of them at that time, I knew I was doing really tremendously good work in my nonprofit, like everyone's trying to do in their nonprofits, and that I had a deficit, and I knew exactly what that deficit was, and I knew exactly how much money I needed to get out the door. In fact, we were cleaning out our garage this weekend, and I opened up an old notebook, and on my to-do list was raise $500,000, which I did, by the way, flat. Like, that's not a joke. That was really on my to-do list, and I think it's on a lot of nonprofit executive directors' to-do lists. So when the California Endowment came to town and and there was this promise of money, we really believed that it was about helping support us to do better work. And what we found was that was true, and it was not in the way that we thought. So the California Endowment is not funding programs and services, and it was not going to fund programs and services that would go away when this 10-year initiative ended. This was fundamentally about changing the systems and policies that affect people's lives and reorganize the money that exists already here, which is hard to wrap your mind around, right? So like my budget is about $1.7 million a year I get to make in grants in our community. The superintendent, as he's reminded me, has $40 million a year, right? The York Tribe has over $20 million a year. Like, this private money is a tiny drop in the bucket in terms of what money actually exists in this community.
Right, but it's what the money is being used for.
Right.
That's what's critical.
That's right.
Because I think a lot of times, and this is a conversation that we've had in the past in one way or another, is that a lot of things are oriented towards service. Right. I will provide X number of things. And that's great, and God love the people who are doing that. But the systems and the structures that continue to perpetuate the need and the lack, for a better word at the moment, continue to stay in place. And without changing those, it is a constant uphill, never-ending fight to get enough money to provide the services,
That's
right?
That's right. And when we first started, we thought, okay, if we get the folks, an interdisciplinary group of folks together to really look at good data, we're going to come up with innovation, new kinds of ideas and solutions that are going to transform our community. And what we found is we had some successes for sure, absolutely. And I don't want to discredit any of the work that we had in those early wins that happened. At the same time, we found that it was really hard to figure out what was really at the root cause, like what was really causing this dysfunction or this problem or this pain for people. And often, too often, unfortunately, we could go to kind of blame people. So for instance, when we got the data back that said that 66% of the kindergarteners were not prepared for kindergarten, it would be easy to say, those parents don't care. They're not preparing their kids for kindergarten.
Right. And some people do that, unfortunately.
Unfortunately, some people do that. And then when we went deeper, and to bring up your empathy piece, when we actually said, let's pause for a second, instead of guessing what needs to happen, let's go and have deep, meaningful conversations with parents. And let me be really clear. This is not about fill out my survey, or my favorite one that I did all the time was come to my meeting. Tell me what you think about my question. And instead we said, forget that for a minute. Let's actually go to people's homes and sit with those grandmas and those mamas and those aunties and uncles and daddies and say, tell me about your day. Tell me about your hopes and dreams for your kid. What really helps in your day? What makes your life better? When do you feel like you're successful? Tell me what's not working. When do you feel like this is, broken? And then by listening deeply to families about their stories and their hopes and dreams and what they really value, and then pulling those all together to really mine them for what's the real learning in here? What's the real insight about what needs to change? We found all kinds of crazy things. One being that only half of the income eligible 3 and 4 year olds. So we're talking about pretty, poor young kids, babies, 3 and 4 year olds in Crescent City, which is not a big area. In Crescent City itself, only 50% of those kids had a preschool slot even available to them. So we found these long wait lists for preschools all across our community, all across the county. And so it wasn't that parents didn't care. It wasn't that parents didn't want to prepare their kids. It wasn't that parents didn't want to go to preschool. It was their literally slots did not exist for them to go to preschool. And that's when we began to really redesign the work. And we've got some beautiful, amazing leaders in this community who have gone through this process with us of stopping and really listening to families who now have all kinds of innovative ideas and energy and are taking giant leadership role in our community, but have really changed how they're doing their business in a lot of ways. And the best part is we're making an impact, right? So we're changing the experience that kids and families are having growing up in our community for the better.
We're speaking with Geneva Wiki of the California Endowment. You're tuned to KFUG Crescent City, 11:33 on this Monday morning. Geneva, so I'm thinking about the collaborative innovation process that really is woven throughout all of this. We can talk a little bit about what that is. And I'm getting the sense that it is starting to be adopted by local governments in some ways, and which is always the hard, in my opinion, is always the hardest group to get to do these kinds of things, because I've worked for local government, so I know how it is. It's sort of designed to crush out every bit of creativity that you might have, but I think that it's starting to be adopted. Would you agree with that? And talk a little bit about collaborative innovation.
Yeah, I would agree with that. One of my favorite examples is we've been working with this city of Crescent City for several years, supporting different projects, including their connection with the Hmong community and the Hmong Cultural Center's development of a curriculum that the city staff has been trained on around, basically it was, Hmong community. What do you want your neighbors and your city officials and first responders to know about your community? And that was very transformative for lots of folks at the city. So as we've been continuing conversations about, how the city evolves, and they've got lots of new leadership and energy, they had allocated some money to better understanding the city pool. So as you know, it's one of our most beautiful assets here. Right. It's one of the only indoor play places that you can go on an evening, on a Friday evening with your family and be doing something healthy and physical and fun and warm and safe. And it could make more money, right? So they had a request for proposals out for consultants around looking at the pool. And as we were in conversation, I was asking about the community engagement process. And the leadership at that time felt a little nervous that the way that they were going to engage community would most likely get them the same kinds of information they already had. So they were going to have a town hall meeting. They were going to do a survey on their website. Right. So most likely people who already care about the pool and already go to the pool, but maybe have some better ideas about the pool, that's who they would reach. And they said, we don't know how we reach people who don't go to the pool. How do we even have those conversations? And so we funded just a little tiny process that was really about building the leadership of the city staff who wanted to do a different kind of community engagement, to do what we call like empathy research, right, or human-centered design process. And so they went to the edges, right? They talked to transgendered young people who don't use the pool. They talked to Spanish-speaking grandma who doesn't use the pool, folks in Klamath and Native elders, and a wide range of folks, and from that gathered insights. In fact, I understand that they have a workshop tonight at the wastewater treatment plant, I believe at 4:00 on that project in particular.
I think you're right about that.
Yeah. So they got all these insights that they didn't know before about how people experienced or didn't experience the pool, how people felt about it. But they also, what I loved was they were, the city staff themselves who participated, and I don't want to speak for them, but what I observed was this energy that I hadn't seen before, this excitement about our work really matters. People really care about this pool, and it is having a dramatic impact in people's lives every day, whether or not we know it. And it's not just a piece of paper to shuffle or a piece of infrastructure to manage, but this is actually a part of the fabric of this community and of people's daily lives, right? And they're building friendships and relationships, as well as having physical and spiritual connection by swimming. And this place really matters, and my work really matters.
And I think that same type of process is tentatively being included in the city and the county's efforts on homelessness, the school district's efforts around LCAP and how money is going to be utilized to address the needs of our most vulnerable students. So going on the basis that that continues, I mean, that's a complete game changer when it comes to addressing these systemic and structural problems and actually talking and including the people closest to the pain in designing the answers to the situations and travails that they may be dealing with every day.
Yeah, that's right. And let's be clear about the word empathy, right? Empathy is very different than sympathy.
That's right.
Sympathy is where I'm holding all my baggage, my beliefs, my feelings, and then I'm listening to you and I'm feeling sad for you, or I'm feeling sympathy for you. Empathy is literally disbanding judgment. You know, one of the PICO principles is like, come in, go in dumb, come out smart. It's that idea. I'm going to pretend like I don't know anything about this issue, even if this is my work every day. And I'm just going to deeply listen to this person. And when they talk about this challenge or that challenge, I'm not going to jump in with, oh, you should go to this workshop, or, oh, here's a resource. It's just to really understand what that person is experiencing, because their truth is their truth. Their experience is a real experience. And if you talk to a few people, you're going to find out if that's a common experience, right? And so then from that, you can pull out what are those innovations. What are those changes we can make to our policies, to our systems, to our structures, to our funding that can really make a change? And that has also been a big shift in our community since this work happened. When we started, we would hear all the time, public money is rigid. The funding streams are siloed. We are bureaucrats who can't change how public money is happening. There's never enough money. The pot is always too small. And what we found over and over again is that that's just not true.
Right.
Often we have way more authority than we think we do, or it doesn't actually require any more money. One of the, as I look at the grants I've made in the last few years, I've been supporting lots of groups to go through a process of empathy research, of really talking to people and then making sense of that in order to create, their plans for change or their initiatives. And the grants have been going to fund that process of collaboration, and very few grants have had to go to support the actual innovations that come as a result. The actual changes or ideas that come out often have public money available to them to actually do the implementation, and that's beautiful.
We're speaking with Geneva Wiki of the California Endowment. You are tuned to KFUG, Crescent City. This is Public Process. I'm your host, Mike Thornton. One of the things, Geneva, and I want to move us in just a minute, but one of the things that I'm probably way oversimplifying it, is that this process was used in assessing issues around food scarcity. And it really struck me that, at least as I understood it, the premise that people went in with saying there's not enough food for poor people and homeless people. And it's like, so we have to have more food. And they did this type of work. And what they found out was that, in fact, there was quite a bit of food. In reality, what the issues were, no way to cook it, no way to store it, and in fact, in many cases, people didn't know how to cook the food that they were giving. And so by understanding the experience of the people, you can actually then begin to design a solution or set of solutions that can actually address the need, as compared to going, well, gosh darn it, let's get some more food that they can't cook, they can't store, and they don't know how to cook.
Yeah. And there were also issues about timing. So there was, we called it like the hunger calendar, where there wasn't food, equally distributed across the calendar. And for folks who don't know, like if you're on WIC and you have, a certain amount of money to spend, and you've got one shot in that month to spend that money on the food that you're going to need for the month. Like I get anxiety thinking about only going to the grocery store like once a week and having my entire week perfectly planned and never having to go to the grocery store again that week.
Right.
I cannot imagine being a parent and trying to figure out how to fund a whole month and plan for a whole month ahead of time of what kind of food I would need. That is completely overwhelming, I think, for any of us.
Right. Well, and then that there is so much travel time involved, of just like, I have to be at this place between this period of time. How am I going to get there? I don't have a car, and not And if you're not living with that, you don't have a you don't have a tendency to think of it those terms.
That's right. Yeah. And to just, put a little bit of texture on the story, how it really started was my kids go to Joe Hamilton Elementary, and the year before we moved home, there was a morning snack that came every morning. It was like a vegetable at 10 o'clock or something. And then I enrolled my two kids, and the next year, and I'm not taking any credit, but the next year they did not have the numbers. They had gone over the threshold of how many kids qualified for free lunch, and they lost that snack. And so they were mourning this morning snack they really loved. And so folks came to me and said, you need to fund the snack. And the same thing, right? Like, I can't fund the snack, because then when my funding goes away, the snack goes away. But what I will fund is, let's deeply understand what is really going on, and why do the kids need a snack, and what do we need to do to fix the snack. And one of the, most, I think, brilliant things that has happened in this last year was Deborah Kravitz, who's a genius unicorn of a human being, was able to figure out how to have every school in our district besides the high school eliminate that middle lunch. So everybody qualifies for breakfast and lunch, free breakfast and lunch for all the kids in this community. That's beautiful, right?
By changing the way that the system was structured.
Exactly.
So, Geneva, BHC, Building Healthy Communities, has been on this 10-year path. We certainly haven't gotten near to everything that has happened in this community, and we couldn't in this time frame, but it is getting ready to change. What does that look like, realizing that perhaps the final vision hasn't fully been created yet, but from your perspective? Yeah,
well, first, we have not branded Building Healthy Communities or the California Endowment's work very well in this community. Part of that was really intentional. We wanted community partners to own this work, to name it their own name, and to run with it, right? Because that's really what's most important. And in actuality, they're the ones doing the work. The flip side of that then is an invisibility of what's actually happened as a result of investment from the California Endowment under Building Healthy Communities initiative. And I want to believe that lots of the work that we have done have already been embedded in our systems, have already changed how we do our business, and are really sustainable, or as close to sustainable as possible. So there are a few things that I'm really proud of that I am confident will go on long after the, whatever this transition looks like, but also have been going on without any support from the California Endowment for several years. One of our favorite stories in the beginning that is, still working beautifully is the dental van. So Open Door Health Clinic runs a dental van. It goes to each school. It fixes all the children's teeth and then moves on to the next school. And, before that, lots of little kids, and unfortunately still some do, but lots of little kids would have to travel out of town, parents take off work, to fix really big problems because they didn't have that preventative work. And so I don't know the most recent number, but, thousands of kids' teeth have been seen, or, there have been thousands of dental visits as a result of the dental van, and we're confident that that will continue to go on long after 2020. Another is the changes in the school lunch. I already gave a shout out to Deborah Kravitz, but I feel like we should have a parade in her honor. But when we started that story, there were parents like Angie Reese, who went to the school district at that time with different leadership and said, we've got to do better. Our kids we've got a childhood obesity rate that's rising at a higher rate than the state average, and a lot of our children get the bulk of their calories at school. Let's improve the school lunches. And the school district at that time told parents, we don't have enough money. We'll never have enough money. If we want to serve our kids healthy meals, the California Endowment should backfill our budget forever. We did not do that. And instead, the parents kept organizing. They kept researching. They went and met with the food service providers and the chefs in the school district nutrition program. They looked at best practices like Smith River that had this glowing salad bar, and started with an easy win, which was, let's put salad bars in every school. The California Endowment funded a couple of kitchen retrofits at the tune of a few $1,000s, sent Debbie Kravitz down to, meet Jamie Oliver to really get some new, fresh ideas about how other school districts were serving healthier meals. Hired at the time the chef at Sutter Coast Hospital to come and run a chef school, so the food nutrition folks could learn how to cook from scratch. And what I love now, fast forward several years later, is one, the California Endowment's not investing in that. It is continuing to flourish on its own. Two, the school district is now buying local organic meat and produce from our local farmers and food producers to serve our kids. Like my fifth grader can tell an ocean air carrot, off her salad bar, and the difference between an ocean air carrot and a regular organic carrot. She knows the difference by taste because it is so prominent in her school meals. And they've decreased their waste because the prepackaged food that came before the changes just created a lot of garbage.
Right.
Like win, 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 win. And don't even get me started on the Seamless Summer program, where now thousands of meals are being served all across the county in this beautiful ecosystem of partners. So every kid 0 to 18 knows that they're getting, some sort of meal for the majority of the summer. It's beautiful.
We're speaking with Geneva Wiki of the California Endowment. It is 11:49 on this Monday morning. You are tuned to KFUG. I'm Mike Thornton. This is Public Process. So, Geneva, we just have a few minutes left, and we could talk for a long time because there's so much stuff to talk about. So, one of the things that I wanted to talk with you about was, and let's do this first. Okay. You've got some changes coming up, right?
Yes.
Okay, so let's let our listeners know what those are, because you're not leaving, but also doing some stuff.
Yes.
Go ahead.
I do not want to cry, Mike. So after lots of deliberation, and I joke that we saw a psychic and a therapist and a financial advisor, but all of that is true actually. And we went to Stanford Design School. After all of that, my husband has accepted a position in Sacramento, and the California Endowment has an office in Midtown. So anyone who's coming to Sacramento, please stop by. I will maintain my job as the program manager for the Del Norte and Tribal Lands site, and my official work schedule will include at least a week a month here in our community. This is my home. My grandma and my mom and dad and my brother and lots of aunties and cousins, everyone is here. And so we will be back lots and lots, especially for, brush dance season and fishing and other things. But for lots of reasons, this was the right decision for our family. I've got 3 girls, and in the fall, one will start high school, one will start junior high, and one will start kindergarten. And we've done really tremendously good work in school reform, and we have a long way to go. And there's a point in which you have to prioritize and make that trade-off about what's in the best interest of your children. And it's really hard to have teachers, especially Crescent Elk teachers, say to us over and over, your kid deserves better than this. This is a really hard place to be, and your kid deserves better. And so that's my other piece, is like, we need to do more in schoolwork. That's a place where I feel like we have worked really hard, and there's lots more to do, in particular in junior high. We've got lots of kids who, if they play sports or in the band, they're doing great. And I do not have kids who play sports, and my 5th graders in the band. But, we need lots of pathways for our young people. And I'm really proud of the work that we've done with older young people, with our Youth Training Academy and youth organizing and Redwood Voice, youth media. I know that there are hundreds of young people who are more confident about this community, about their ability to make change than there were 10 years ago. Like, we have grown a different generation of young people who walk around with their t-shirts that say things like VOTA and, power. And I'm really proud of that. And we have more work to do, and we have more work to do specifically with that junior high age kids.
And I'm just still kind of going back to this, having teachers say your kids deserve better than this. And and I understand we're in a very rural, very isolated area, we'll never be able to compete with some of those more resource-rich areas, but at the same time, we have to strive that no teacher in our local schools will ever feel the need to say that. And I mean, and it's doable. And I think, and a big part of, at least if I understand it, with the endowment and building healthy communities is really moving in and doubling down on youth activism, youth organizing, and youth civic engagement. That's a lot of what's going to be coming out of 2020, right?
Yeah. So our board has made a commitment to what they're calling 3 bold ideas post 2020. That first one is exactly what you said. So doubling down on community organizing, bringing together young people and adults to really understand how to change systems and policies. That's idea number 1. Idea number 2 is about just systems. So this is really, and it's about systems that touch young people predominantly. So this is where a lot of work in school reform, recognizing that, one size does not fit all, that we can't just continue to blame parents and not look at our systems altogether, and that school climate and school discipline and school pushouts are still real issues, and that there are real inequities still occurring in our communities. And that's true here, unfortunately, too. And then the third bold idea is about health systems. So health for all. We are a health foundation at the end of the day, even though we have a very broad definition of health. And so that will include healthcare, health access, and prevention.
We've been speaking with Geneva Wiki of the California Endowment. And Geneva, I had wanted us to also, and I want to invite you back. I'm really glad you're not going away, because I really want to talk about those inequities, and particularly around race and structural and systemic race and racism issues. We do not have the time to give that its due on this program today, but I would love to have you back to have a very in-depth discussion of that, if you would be willing to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Let me ask you, in just the few minutes that we have left, thoughts that you'd like to share as we work our way out of this segment of the program?
Yeah, I think there are a few really exciting happenings coming up. One is this year's Youth Training Academy, I believe, will be better than ever. So if you have a young person between the ages of 15 to 24, hop on Facebook or call the Wild Rivers Community Foundation at 707-465-1238 and get your young person connected with the Youth Training Academy. Young people can, there's a host of pathways, including leadership and organizing and media, and it's really profound and good work. The others, we have a graphic novel coming out called How Did We Get Here? And it's written...
Oh, that's going to be fun.
It's going to be so good. It's written by our friend Ruthie Rhodes, author and playwright Ruthie Rhodes. And it takes place at 4th of July, and it stars 4 young people watching the 4th of July parade. And it tells the story of how they all got here. It is powerful. It is deep. It will say things that have never been spoken out loud in our community and public spaces. And I believe it will be a real tool for us to talk about our histories in a way that is healing, where we can really come together, where we can see how we're all really interconnected, and how my well-being is connected to your well-being and is connected to our neighbors' well-being, and that we're all in this together.
I have seen the script for this. It is very powerful, and I don't know whether it will happen, but I had a conversation with someone who's deeply involved in this process and suggested that perhaps we could do a dramatic reading of it on KFUG.
We would love a dramatic reading.
I think that would be just super cool, because it is incredibly powerful, and it will certainly, I think, bring a tremendous amount of important issues, perspectives, and history to light when it is released. Geneva Wiki, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you so much.
And And I'm thrilled that City Manager Eric Weir is here. And I also wish I could keep you on for another hour, but you've got things to do. Go get seaweed or do whatever it is you're going to do. Geneva Wiki, thank you so much for being with us. Appreciate it. You're tuned to KFUG Crescent City 101.1 on your FM radio dial, worldwide on the internet, kfugradio.org. This is Public Process. Stay tuned. Crescent City City Manager Eric Weir will be joining us in just a few minutes.